"Your time is over, Mom. Just accept it." Those were the last words Grace Jubson heard before her daughter slammed the door, leaving her alone in the kitchen that suddenly felt too big and too empty. She was 45, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with hands that refused to shake even when the world told her she was invisible. The dating apps had stopped working. The men at bars looked through her like glass. Even the grocery store cashier called her, "Ma'am," with that pitying tone reserved for women's society had stamped with an expiration date. But Grace refused to disappear. Then one afternoon, struggling with shopping bags in the parking lot, a voice cut through her isolation. "Let me help you with that." She looked up to see him, a man younger than her by over a decade, with sharp features, tattooed hands, and eyes that actually saw her. Michael Crew, 32 years old. Korean. Impossibly sophisticated. And for the first time in years, someone looked at Grace Jubson like she was worth stopping for. Welcome to our channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Grace Jubson had learned to measure her worth in silence. 24 years. That's how long she'd spent raising children, sacrificing her body, her youth, her dreams on the altar of motherhood. And now, at 45, with her last daughter finally grown, she stood in an empty house that echoed with everything she'd given up. The apartment in the suburbs felt haunted by her own ghost. Bills scattered across the kitchen counter, electricity, water, insurance, credit cards maxed out from her daughter's college tuition. No flowers. No "good morning, beautiful" texts. Just spam emails about senior discounts and retirement planning, as if the world had decided she was already dead. She scrolled through Instagram, watching younger women receive engagement rings and Valentine's bouquets, their comments sections flooded with heart eye emojis and "gorgeous queen" affirmations. Grace posted a photo of herself in a new dress last week. Her daughter commented, "Mom, why are you trying so hard? It's embarrassing." 3 likes. 2 from spam accounts. Grace deleted the post at 2 a.m., sitting in bed with the lights off, wondering when exactly she'd become the kind of woman people looked past. She'd tried everything: healthy eating, gym memberships she couldn't afford, skincare routines that promised to turn back time. She bought herself nice things with money she didn't have, trying to prove she still mattered. She'd even attempted online dating. That had been a disaster. The first man asked for money after 2 conversations. The second one ghosted her when she sent a full body photo. The third one, she didn't want to think about the third one, who'd shown up to their coffee date, looked her up and down, and said, "Oh, you're older than your pictures." She was exactly the age her profile said. He just hadn't believed a 45-year-old woman would dare exist in a dating pool. Her daughter found out about the dating apps and told her friends. They'd laughed about it at a family gathering. Grace had overheard them in the kitchen, her own child leading the mockery. "My mom thinks she's going to find love on Tinder. At her age. Can you imagine? She's delusional." Grace had stood frozen in the hallway, holding a tray of appetizers, feeling something crack inside her chest. But she didn't stop trying. Because the alternative, accepting that she was too old for desire, for romance, for being seen as anything other than someone's mother or someone's invisible neighbor, felt like dying before she was dead. So on this particular Saturday morning, Grace did what she always did. She got dressed, applied makeup, put on the gold earrings she'd bought herself for her birthday. And she went to the grocery store, because even invisible women need to eat. The store was crowded, families with screaming children, couples holding hands in the produce section, teenage employees stocking shelves without making eye contact. Grace moved through the aisles like a ghost, picking up items no one noticed her holding. She loaded her cart methodically. Fresh vegetables because she refused to let her body go even if her hope had, whole grain bread, chicken breast, the expensive Greek yogurt that made her feel like she still deserved good things. By the time she reached the checkout, her cart was full and her arms were tired and her heart was just so heavy. The cashier, a girl no older than 20, barely looked at her. "That'll be $147.63. Grace paid with a credit card that was probably too close to maxed out, bagged everything herself because no one offered to help, and pushed her cart toward the parking lot, trying to ignore the way couples walked past her like she was part of the landscape. Her car was parked at the far end of the lot. Of course it was. She started loading bags into the trunk, juggling too many at once because she'd done this alone for so long she'd forgotten there was any other way. That's when she dropped one. Oranges rolled across the asphalt. A jar of pasta sauce shattered, red spreading across the concrete like blood. Grace stood there, staring at the mess, feeling the heat of tears she refused to let fall. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She looked up. He stood there in the afternoon sunlight, tall, impossibly well dressed in dark slacks and a fitted black shirt, tattoos visible on his forearms, hair styled with the kind of precision that suggested money and power. Asian features, probably Korean, maybe 30, maybe younger. His eyes were dark and focused entirely on her face. Not on the mess. On her. Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. "I'm fine," she said automatically, the way women learn to say when they're anything but. "Just clumsy. Let me help you." Before she could protest, he was crouching down, picking up oranges with hands that looked strong and careful, avoiding the broken glass, placing everything gently back into her bags. He worked efficiently, like someone used to solving problems, and when he stood up, he was holding 2 bags in one hand like they weighed nothing. "Your trunk?" Grace nodded, too surprised to speak. He loaded the bags carefully, then turned back to her with the kind of attention that made her feel like she was the only person in the parking lot. "You're parked pretty far out. They should have closer spots for when you're shopping alone." "I'm used to it," Grace heard herself say, and immediately regretted how sad that sounded. He smiled, just a small one, but genuine. "You shouldn't have to be." For a moment, they just stood there. Grace became aware of how long it had been since a man looked at her like this. Not with pity, not with dismissal, just interest. "I'm Michael," he said, extending his hand. "Michael Crew." Grace. She shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm, the confidence in his grip. "Grace Jubson." Grace. The way he said her name made it sound like something valuable. "That's a beautiful name. Suits you." She felt heat rise in her cheeks and immediately hated herself for blushing like a teenager. "Thank you for helping. You didn't have to. I wanted to." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Then, after a pause that felt charged with something Grace couldn't name, "I know this might be forward, but would it be okay if I called you sometime? Maybe took you for coffee?" Grace's heart stopped, then started again, too fast. She searched his face for the joke, the punchline, the moment he'd laugh and say he was talking to someone else. But his expression remained steady, genuinely hopeful. "I'm 45, she blurted out, because she'd learned the hard way that honesty saved heartbreak. "I have a grown daughter. I'm not young." Michael's smile didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. "I'm 32. I know exactly what I'm asking. And I'd still like to call you, if that's okay." Grace stood there in the grocery store parking lot, surrounded by scattered oranges and broken glass, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and gave him her number. Grace stared at her phone for 3 days, waiting for a text that never came. She'd convinced herself it had been a fluke, a kind gesture from a polite stranger who'd felt sorry for the middle-aged woman dropping groceries in a parking lot. By Wednesday night, she'd almost deleted his number. Then her phone rang at 11:47 p.m. "Grace? It's Michael. From the grocery store. I hope I'm not calling too late." His voice was deeper on the phone, rougher around the edges, like he'd been holding something back when they met. Grace sat up in bed, heart hammering against her ribs, suddenly aware she was wearing an old t-shirt with a hole in the collar and no makeup. "No, I'm awake." "Good. I've been thinking about you." Those 5 words hit her like a physical thing. When was the last time someone said they'd been thinking about her? Not about what she could do for them, not about the bills she needed to pay or the meals she needed to cook, but just her. "You don't even know me," she said, trying to sound casual instead of desperate. "Not yet. But I'd like to." They talked for 2 hours that first night. Michael asked questions no one had asked her in years. What she liked to read, what music made her feel alive, what she'd wanted to be before life decided for her. Grace found herself confessing things she hadn't said out loud in decades. How she'd wanted to be a photographer. How she'd given up art school when she got pregnant at 21. How she'd spent her entire adult life being someone's mother and forgotten how to be Grace. "You sound sad when you talk about it," Michael said quietly. I'm not sad. I'm just realistic. That part of my life is over. Why does it have to be over? Grace didn't have an answer for that. The calls became a routine. Always late at night, always when the world felt smaller and safer. Michael never pushed, never asked for more than she was willing to give, but Grace could feel something building between them. Something dangerous and thrilling and completely terrifying. On the 5th call, she finally asked what had been nagging at her since the parking lot. Why me, Michael? You could have anyone. Why a 45-year-old woman with stretch marks and a daughter who hates her? The line went quiet for so long she thought he'd hung up. I grew up in foster care, he said finally, his voice stripped of all polish. 13 different homes before I aged out at 18. You want to know what I remember most? The women who looked at me like I was worth something. The ones who made me feel safe, even for a minute. I never had that. Not really. Grace's throat tightened. I don't date casually, Grace. I don't do this. Call women at midnight, ask them to coffee, any of it. But when I saw you in that parking lot, trying so hard to hold it together, I saw someone who deserved to be helped. Who deserved to be seen. Michael, let me take you to dinner. A real date. Let me show you how you should be treated. Grace closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 24 years of invisibility pressing against the possibility of being seen again. Okay, she whispered, but neither of them knew that Grace's daughter had been listening outside the bedroom door, and what she'd just heard would change everything. Grace changed her outfit 7 times before settling on a navy dress that didn't scream, trying too hard, but also didn't whisper, gave up years ago. Her hands shook as she applied eyeliner, remembering the last real date she'd been on, the man who'd looked at her like she'd catfished him with her own honest photos. Where are you going all dressed up? Her daughter's voice cut through the bathroom doorway, dripping with suspicion. Just dinner with a friend. Right, a friend. The way she said it made Grace feel pathetic, like a teenager sneaking out instead of a grown woman who'd earned the right to have a life. Michael picked her up at 7 in a car that cost more than Grace's annual salary. He opened her door, waited until she was settled, and looked at her like she was the most stunning thing he'd ever seen. You look beautiful. Grace waited for but that never came. The restaurant was the kind of place Grace had only seen in movies, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, tables with actual linens, a wine list thicker than a phone book. The hostess greeted Michael by name, and Grace felt every eye in the room track their movement to a private corner table. She was the oldest woman in the dining room by at least a decade. Maybe 2. Everyone staring, Grace whispered once they were seated. Michael didn't even glance around. Let them. You're the most interesting person here. I'm the oldest person here. You're the most beautiful person here. He said it like a fact, not a compliment, and something in Grace's chest cracked open. The evening unfolded like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Michael ordered in fluent French, asked the sommelier about her father's vineyard in Napa, and made Grace laugh so hard she forgot to worry about the women at the next table whispering behind their menus. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Michael said halfway through the main course, his eyes locked on hers. I'm terrified this is a joke, Grace admitted. That you're going to realize you made a mistake and I'll go back to being invisible. Michael reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending electricity up her arm. I've spent my whole life building an empire so I'd never feel powerless again. I don't make mistakes about what I want, Grace. And I want to know everything about you. Grace felt tears threaten and blinked them back. Why? What could you possibly want with someone like me? Someone like you? Michael's grip tightened. You mean someone who raised a family alone? Who kept going when the world told her she didn't matter? Who still puts on lipstick every morning like an act of rebellion? How did you? I noticed things. It's how I've stayed alive in my world. That word, world, carried weight Grace didn't fully understand yet. What do you do, Michael? You've never actually told me. His expression shifted, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. I run a family business. Import-export, mostly. Some investments. Nothing you need to worry about. But Grace had grown up in neighborhoods where family business and import-export meant things people didn't say out loud. Are you? Let's just say I'm very good at protecting what's mine. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. And I'd very much like you to be mine, Grace. Grace should have been scared. Should have recognized the red flags waving in her face. But all she felt was wanted for the first time in 2 decades. When he dropped her off that night, he kissed her on the doorstep, slow and deep and claiming, and Grace forgot why she'd ever thought she was too old for this. But inside the house, her daughter watched through the window, already planning how to destroy the one thing that made her mother happy. Grace's sister hosted Thanksgiving that year, and Grace arrived with homemade sweet potato pie and something she hadn't brought to a family gathering in years, hope. She'd seen Michael twice more since their first date. Walks through the park where he held her hand like it was precious. A jazz club where he pulled her close and whispered things that made her blush like a teenager. She hadn't told her family yet, but the secret sat warm in her chest, making everything brighter. Her daughter, Maya, arrived late with 3 of her friends, all in their early 20s, all glued to their phones. Grace tried to catch her eye, tried to bridge the distance that had grown between them since Maya graduated college, but her daughter looked through her like she always did now. "Grace, you look different," her sister commented, pouring wine. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing. Just taking better care of myself." "Oh God." Maya's voice cut across the kitchen. "She's probably back on those dating apps again." The room went quiet. Grace felt her face flush. "Maya, what? It's true, isn't it?" Maya turned to her friends, who were suddenly very interested. "My mom thinks she's going to find love online. At 45. With men who are clearly scamming her." "I'm not on the apps anymore," Grace said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Oh, so you gave up? Finally accepted reality?" One of Maya's friends giggled. Grace watched her daughter's face, saw the cruelty there, the satisfaction in humiliating her in front of an audience. "Actually, I met someone. In person." The words came out before Grace could stop them. Maya's expression shifted from mockery to disbelief. "You met someone?" She said it like Grace had claimed to meet a unicorn. "Right. And I'm sure he's real and totally not after whatever money you don't have." "Maya, that's enough." Grace's sister tried to intervene, but the damage was already spreading. "What is he, Mom? Another guy who asked you to wire him money? Another catfish? Or did you pay for one of those sugar baby websites?" Maya was playing to her friends now, who were recording on their phones. "My mom is so desperate for attention she'll believe any man who says hello to her." Grace stood there, holding her pie, feeling every pair of eyes in the kitchen dissecting her. Her sister looked horrified. Her nieces and nephews stared at their plates. And Maya, her daughter, the child she'd sacrificed everything for, smiled like she'd won something. "I raised you better than this," Grace finally said, her voice shaking. "You raised me to see reality, Mom. And the reality is you're too old for this. Men don't want women your age. They want us." Maya gestured to her friends. "Young, tight, relevant. You had your chance 20 years ago and you blew it having me. Now stop embarrassing yourself and accept that your time is over." Grace set the pie down carefully, grabbed her purse, and walked out without another word. She made it to her car before the tears came, not from sadness, but from rage at letting her own daughter make her feel worthless. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Thinking about you. Can I see you tonight?" Grace stared at the message for a long moment, Maya's words echoing in her head. "Your time is over." She typed back, "Yes. Please." Because maybe it was time to stop letting other people, even her own daughter, define what she deserved. But what Grace didn't know was that Maya had gone through her phone the week before and found something that would give her exactly the ammunition she needed to destroy this. Maya had found something on Grace's phone, and whatever it was had made her smile in a way that promised destruction. But Grace didn't know that yet. All she knew was that Michael had asked her to come to his penthouse, and for the first time since Thanksgiving, she felt like she could breathe. The building was in the expensive part of the city, the kind with doormen who wore actual uniforms and lobby floors so polished Grace could see her reflection. Michael met her at the elevator, and the concern in his eyes when he saw her face made something break loose inside her. "What happened?" Grace shook her head, not trusting her voice. He pulled her inside, wrapped her in his arms, and just held her until the shaking stopped. The penthouse stretched out behind them, floor-to-ceiling windows, art that probably cost more than her mortgage, furniture that looked like it belonged in magazines. "My daughter," Grace finally said. She told everyone I was pathetic for thinking someone could want me. Michael's jaw tightened. Your daughter is wrong. Is she though? Grace pulled back to look at him. Michael, what are we doing? You're 32. You could have anyone. Why are you wasting your time on a 45-year-old woman with baggage and a terrible family? Sit down. His voice carried an authority that made her obey without thinking. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one, and sat across from her. I need to tell you some things. About who I am. Grace's stomach dropped. The family business I mentioned? It's not entirely legal. I run an organization that controls most of the import operations on the East Coast. Some of it's legitimate, most of it isn't. He watched her face carefully. I'm what people call a crime boss, Grace. I've built an empire, and I've done things I'm not proud of to keep it. Grace should have been terrified. Should have run. But all she felt was a strange sense of clarity. All those expensive dinners, the way people looked at him with fear and respect, the careful way he never quite answered questions about his work. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm falling for you, and you deserve to know what you're getting into. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But there's something else. Something I've never told anyone. The vulnerability in his voice made Grace set down her glass. I grew up in 13 different foster homes. Some were fine, most weren't. But the ones I remember, the ones that felt like home even for a few weeks, were the ones with women who looked at me like I mattered. His voice roughened. Older women. Women who'd lived enough to be kind. Women who knew how to make a scared kid feel safe. Grace's breath caught. I know it sounds strange. Maybe it is strange, but I've always been drawn to women with experience, with depth, with the kind of strength that only comes from surviving hard things. Michael looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. When I saw you in that parking lot, trying so hard to hold it together, refusing to cry even when everything was falling apart. I saw someone who understood what it meant to be strong and alone. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since. You're attracted to me because I remind you of a mother figure? Grace asked carefully. I'm attracted to you because you're everything I never had and everything I've always wanted. Strength, grace, resilience, the ability to keep showing up even when the world tells you you're not enough. He moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands. I'm not looking for a mother, Grace. I'm looking for an equal. Someone who knows what it costs to survive. Someone who won't break when they see the parts of me that aren't pretty. Grace looked at this powerful, dangerous man kneeling in front of her, offering her something she'd thought was lost forever, the chance to be chosen, not despite her age, but because of everything it represented. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be with someone like you. Then let me show you. He kissed her then, different from before, deeper, claiming, full of promise and danger and something that felt terrifyingly like forever. And for the first time in years, Grace let herself believe she deserved this. But 3 floors below, in the parking garage, Maya sat in her car, staring at the screenshot she'd stolen from her mother's phone, Michael's full name, his address, his Instagram handle. She smiled as she opened a new message and began to type. Maya's email was already waiting in Michael's inbox, timed perfectly to arrive while he was distracted by business meetings. But for now, Grace floated through Paris in a bubble of disbelief, still unable to accept that this life, his life, had room for someone like her. Michael woke her at dawn with coffee and a passport. Pack light. We leave in 3 hours. Grace sat up, confused and still half asleep. Leave? For where? Paris. I have business there, and I want you with me. Michael, I can't just, I have work, I have responsibilities. Call in sick. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, slow and persuasive. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Grace couldn't remember. That's how she ended up on a private plane 12 hours later, drinking champagne at 30,000 feet while Michael worked on his laptop, occasionally looking up to smile at her like she was the best decision he'd ever made. Paris in the spring was everything the movies promised and nothing Grace had ever let herself dream about. Michael had reserved a suite at a hotel that overlooked the Eiffel Tower, with a balcony where they drank wine and watched the city light up at night. He took her to galleries where he knew the curators by name, to restaurants where chefs came out to greet him personally, to streets where spring blossoms fell like snow and Grace felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. I can't afford any of this, she said on their third night, standing in front of a boutique window where a dress cost more than her monthly rent. Good thing I can. Michael pulled her inside before she could protest. Pick anything you want. Michael. Grace. He turned her to face him, hands on her shoulders. I have more money than I'll ever spend. Let me spend it on you. Let me show you what it feels like to be spoiled. She tried on the dress, emerald green silk that made her skin glow and her curves look intentional instead of apologetic. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Michael's expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. We'll take it, he told the attendant. Then, to Grace, and the shoes. And that necklace you were looking at. That night, wearing her new dress, Grace let Michael lead her through cobblestone streets to a private dinner on a rooftop where they were the only guests. He fed her chocolate and kissed the taste off her lips and told her stories about the boy he'd been, angry and scared and desperate to matter. I built this empire so no one could ever make me feel powerless again, he said, tracing patterns on her hand. But being with you? That's the first time power has ever felt like the wrong thing to want. What do you want instead? This. You. A reason to come home that isn't just another empire to maintain. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not used to being someone's reason. Get used to it. They made love that night with the Eiffel Tower sparkling outside their window, and Grace finally understood what it meant to feel cherished instead of tolerated. To be desired instead of convenient. To be chosen. But while Grace discovered Paris, Maya sat in her childhood bedroom, scrolling through every photo her mother had ever sent, every text message, every digital breadcrumb that would lead her to Michael's world. She found his Instagram handle buried in a screenshot Grace had accidentally saved, a photo of them at dinner, Michael tagged in the corner. Maya clicked through to his profile. Private, but his follower list was public. Business associates. Known names in circles that made Maya's pulse quicken with possibility and vindictive satisfaction. She created a fake account, professional looking, believable, with a woman's photo stolen from a lifestyle influencer's page. Then she sent Michael a follow request and composed her first message, designed to plant seeds of doubt about the woman sleeping peacefully in his arms halfway across the world. Mr. Crew, I think there's something you should know about Grace Jubson. Maya's message sat in Michael's Instagram requests, waiting like a loaded gun. But the trigger hadn't been pulled yet, and Grace returned from Paris glowing with a happiness that made her daughter's stomach turn with jealous rage. Grace had left her phone charging in the kitchen while she showered, still dreaming of cobblestone streets and Michael's hands in her hair. Maya had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. She grabbed the phone, bypassed the passcode she'd watched her mother enter 100 times, and started digging. The text thread with Michael was a goldmine. Photos of them together at restaurants Grace could never afford. Voice messages where he called her beautiful and mine. Flight confirmations to Paris. Hotel reservations that cost more per night than Maya's monthly rent. But it was the Instagram messages that made Maya smile. Grace had sent Michael screenshots of his own posts, asking about restaurants he'd been to, places he'd traveled, the art in his penthouse. And in those screenshots, his full Instagram handle was visible, along with his bio that carefully avoided mentioning what he actually did for a living, but name-dropped enough high-profile associates that Maya could piece it together. Michael Crew wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous, connected, the kind of man who ran an empire built on things people didn't talk about in polite company. And her pathetic, desperate mother had somehow convinced him she was worth his time. Maya screenshotted everything. Michael's handle, his follower list, his tagged photos at events where he stood next to men Maya recognized from news articles about alleged organized crime figures. She saved it all to her cloud, then carefully deleted her tracks from Grace's phone. That night, after Grace went to bed still smiling like a teenager in love, Maya created her masterpiece. A fake Instagram account with a professional headshot stolen from a corporate lawyer's LinkedIn. Sophisticated, believable, the kind of woman Michael would take seriously. She followed him and sent a request with a carefully crafted message. Mr. Crew, I apologize for the intrusion, but I felt obligated to reach out regarding Grace Jubson. I'm a colleague of hers from her previous workplace, and I'm concerned about some things I've noticed. She's mentioned you several times in conversations, bragging about your wealth and connections. I'm worried she may not be as genuine as she appears. She's been researching high net worth individuals for months, and your name came up frequently in those searches before you ever met. I thought you should know. I have screenshots if you need proof. Maya hit send, then created a second account. And a third. Each one with a different angle, a different story, all designed to paint Grace as a calculating gold digger who'd orchestrated their chance meeting in the parking lot. I saw her practicing conversations in her car before going into that grocery store. She knew you shopped there. She told her daughter she was going to land a rich man before the end of the year. Her words exactly. She's been lying about her age. She's actually 48, not 45. Check her real birth certificate. Some of it was lies. Some of it was twisted truth. All of it was designed to destroy. Maya sent 15 messages over 3 days, each from a different fake account, each one adding another crack to the foundation of Michael's trust. She made Grace sound predatory, manipulative, desperate enough to research his shopping habits and stage their meeting. The screenshots she sent were doctored, text conversations that never happened, search histories she'd fabricated, even a fake dating profile where Grace listed her ideal man as wealthy, powerful, preferably younger. And then Maya waited, watching her mother float through the house like a woman who'd finally found her fairy tale, completely unaware that her own daughter had just burned it to the ground. Grace's phone rang. Michael's name lit up the screen. But this time, when she answered, his voice sounded different. Careful, distant. Grace, we need to talk. About how we met. Grace heard something shift in Michael's voice when he said they needed to talk, and every insecurity she'd ever buried came roaring back to the surface. This was it. The moment he realized his mistake. The moment she became invisible again. Michael arrived at her apartment an hour later, and the careful distance in his posture made Grace's chest tighten. He didn't kiss her hello. Didn't reach for her hand. Just stood in her small living room that suddenly felt suffocatingly humble compared to his penthouse, holding his phone like evidence. I need you to be honest with me, he said quietly. Did you know who I was before we met? Grace's stomach dropped. What? No. How would I? Did you research me? Follow my schedule? Know I shopped at that grocery store? Michael, what are you talking about? He showed her his phone. Message after message from accounts she'd never seen, all claiming to know her, all painting her as a calculating predator who'd orchestrated everything. Screenshots of conversations she'd never had. Search histories she'd never made. A dating profile she'd never created. Grace felt the room tilt. That's not real. None of that is real. I don't know those people, I never. So you're saying 15 different people are lying? Yes. Her voice cracked. Michael, I dropped groceries in a parking lot. You helped me. That's all that happened. I didn't even know your last name until our third date. He wanted to believe her. She could see it in his eyes, the war between what he felt and what the evidence suggested. But Michael had built an empire by trusting facts over feelings, by assuming everyone had an angle. One of them sent me a screenshot of your text to your daughter. You told her you were going to land a rich man before the end of the year. Grace's blood ran cold, not because she'd said it, she hadn't, but because she recognized the manipulation. The intimate knowledge of her relationship with Maya. The way these leaks felt designed to hit exactly where she was most vulnerable. Let me see your phone, she said suddenly. Michael hesitated, then handed it over. Grace scrolled through the accounts. Professional photos, vague bios, all created within the last week. All following the same pattern. These are fake, she said, her voice shaking with rage and recognition. Look at the dates. They were all created after Paris. After, she stopped, a terrible realization crashing over her. Did any of them mention my daughter specifically? Michael frowned. 2 of them. Why? Grace felt sick. She pulled out her own phone, opened Instagram, and searched for her daughter's account. Maya had posted a photo 2 days ago, cocktails with friends, celebrating something she'd captioned, justice served. It's her, Grace whispered. It's Maya. She did this. Your daughter? She went through my phone. She must have found your information and, Grace's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped her phone. Michael, she hates that I'm happy. She's spent months telling me I'm too old for love, that I should accept being alone. When she found out about you, she tried to destroy it. Michael's voice had gone cold in a way that reminded Grace exactly who he was. What he was capable of. Do you know what I do to people who try to manipulate me? Michael. I'm going to need proof, Grace. Real proof. Because if you're telling the truth, then your daughter just made the worst mistake of her life. But before Grace could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Mom, we need to talk. I did something I need to tell you about. Maya's confession text arrived like a detonation, but Grace already knew the truth. What she didn't know was whether Michael would forgive being made a fool of, even if Grace herself was innocent. She looked up at him, watching his jaw tighten as he read Maya's message over her shoulder. What does she want? To confess, apparently. Grace's voice was hollow. Probably thinks getting ahead of it will save her. Does she know who I am? What I could do to her? The threat wasn't idle. Grace saw it in his eyes, the cold calculation of a man who'd built power by making examples of people who crossed him. She touched his arm, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. She's still my daughter. She tried to destroy you. I know. Grace felt tears burn her throat. But I need to be the one to handle this. Michael studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fine. But I want to be there. And I want her to understand exactly what she did. 3 days later, Grace walked into a private dining room at the most expensive restaurant in the city. Michael had arranged everything. The intimate space, the impeccable service, the guest list that included Maya, Grace's sister, and 2 of Maya's friends who'd been there for the Thanksgiving humiliation. Maya arrived looking smug, probably thinking this was her mother's pathetic attempt at reconciliation. Her expression shifted when she saw Michael standing beside Grace's chair, his hand possessive on her shoulder. Mom, what is this? Sit down, Maya. Grace's voice carried an authority her daughter had never heard before. Everyone took their seats. The tension in the room was suffocating. Michael signaled the waiter, who brought champagne that probably cost more than Maya's car payment. I wanted everyone here, Grace began, because I'm tired of being humiliated in front of my family. So tonight, I'm returning the favor. Maya's face paled. Grace pulled out her phone and projected it onto the screen Michael had arranged on the wall. 15 fake Instagram accounts, all created within days of each other. All sending messages designed to convince Michael that Grace was a gold digger. You went through my phone, Grace said quietly. Found Michael's information, and created an entire campaign to destroy the first real happiness I've had in 20 years. Mom, I was trying to protect you. From what? From being loved? From feeling worthy? Grace's voice cracked. You told me my time was over. That I was too old. That I should accept being invisible. And when someone finally saw me, you tried to take it away. Maya's friends were staring at their plates. Grace's sister looked horrified. Maya herself sat frozen, realizing the trap she'd walked into. You told your friends I was delusional for trying to find love, Grace continued. You laughed at me at Thanksgiving. You made me feel worthless for wanting to be desired. And when I finally found someone who treated me like I mattered, you tried to convince him I was using him. Because you are. Maya exploded. Look at him, Mom. He's rich and dangerous and way too young for you. You think this is real? You think he actually wants you? Michael stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every empire he'd built, every war he'd won. I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. He looked directly at Maya. Your mother gave me something I've spent my entire life searching for, acceptance without judgment. Strength without arrogance. The ability to be vulnerable without being weak. She didn't know who I was or what I'm worth. She saw me as a man, not a bank account. He turned to Grace, and his expression softened in a way that made her throat tight. I grew up in foster care. 13 homes. No mother. No family. I built everything I have because I needed to prove I mattered. But with Grace, I don't have to prove anything. She makes me feel like I'm enough, just as I am. He faced Maya again. You tried to take that from me. From both of us. Because you couldn't stand to see your mother happy. She's my mother. Maya's voice was shrill now. She's supposed to focus on family, not some. She raised you. Michael cut her off, his voice like ice. She sacrificed 24 years. And the moment she tried to have something for herself, you punished her for it. Grace stood, facing her daughter with tears streaming down her face. I love you, Maya. But I'm done letting you make me feel worthless. Michael makes me happy. He treats me like I'm precious. And if you can't accept that, then maybe we need some distance. Maya looked around the table, at her friends who wouldn't meet her eyes, at her aunt who was shaking her head in disappointment, at Michael who looked like he could end her life with a phone call. You're choosing him over me? I'm choosing myself, Grace said softly. For the first time in my life. Maya stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. Fine, have your little fantasy. But when he gets tired of you, and he will, don't come crying to me. She stormed out. Her friends followed, mortified. Grace's sister reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Michael pulled Grace into his arms, and she finally let herself break, crying into his chest while he held her like she was the most valuable thing he'd ever owned. But outside, in her car, Maya made one final decision. If she couldn't destroy their relationship from the inside, she'd find someone who could destroy it from the outside. And she knew exactly who to call.